Hello! You are watching the 10th video in a series where I'm trying to remake the Pokemon Gen 1 battle system in Godot. It's taking a lot longer than I thought it would, but I've learned a lot from it, and hopefully you've learned a little bit from it too. If you're brand new here, you may not get a lot out of this video, so I'm going to link the playlist where this whole course starts, but if you just want to keep watching, that's like your choice, man. I'm not the boss of you. We're about to wrap up the audio and visual effects section of this series with some work on UI stuff and fixes for some critical bugs. After that, we're going to be free to finish up some more gameplay elements like adding items, monster level ups, move management, and more. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm in AVFX Manager here. We worked on this a bunch in the last video. We're going to fix a quick bug here where we need to queue free our AVFX group when it finishes. So in AVFX Manager here, before we set current effect group to null, so it doesn't sit around forever. And in queue AVFX group, let's check if a resource is null, and if so, we want to continue. That's going to take us back to the start of this loop, and that way we won't mess up and try to instantiate anything that's null. Let's see if anything breaks here, and it's looking good. Cool. There's another major bug here, and we're going to hit that in a little bit, but let's move on for now and see it. Now, let's make sure our conditions can trigger AVFX at certain points in time too. Think about Pokemon when your monster's poisoned and the game displays little skulls to show that they're taking damage. You can hook this into any event you want, but we're only going to set up effects for the beginning of each monster's turn. We'll go to our condition resource and let's add a new expert var on begin turn AVFX. It's going to be an array of AVFX resource, and we can use this exactly the same way as the move AVFX. I'm going to make a quick animation for poison here. We've done this before. We'll go to our 2D mode here so that we can see it. We'll add a child to main. It'll be an animated sprite 2D. And all we need to do is add sprite frames, new sprite frames, click on that, and in assets, art, animations, we'll grab the one called poison. Make sure it's set to 48 by 48, click select all, and add 6 frames. We can tinker with the speed here, and I'm going to go for 12 FPS, but you can choose whatever number you want. We'll save it and we'll rename it to Poison. Then we can drop it into Scenes Animations to save it into our file system. Tremendous. Now delete it from your scene and we can give Poison the condition and AVFX for animation and target self. Let's give Salamander an attack that does poison. We'll give him Poison Sting. Poison Sting doesn't have any AVFX on it, so we won't see anything on usage, which is worth testing. And try this out. And realize that there's a huge bug here. So if I add one AVFX here, that's going to work. And it looks like we're not supporting a case where a move or a condition in this case has no AVFX. It will cause a freeze essentially. So in AVFX Manager, let's add if group.get children size is 0. We can just instantly resolve the AVFX group. And then current effect group.queueFree, current effect group equals null. And I'm actually thinking this is not a good way to solve this. We should not append it at all unless it's got values. So let's see if that breaks things if we use an effect with no AVFX. Okay, and that works. And let's just quickly add a queue free and check it. And that works too. This should now support moves with no AVFX, and that's probably for the best because some moves might not, and we don't want the game to freeze if we forget. All right, let's figure out how conditions get triggered. In condition resource, we've got onBeginTurnFX, and we can probably trigger our AVFX in the same spot. So in monster controller, we can copy the code from our other QAVFX and just paste it down into onTurnBegin here. Because we're doing it in groups, we want multiple conditions to display one after another. And then we'll swap in condition resource on BeginTurnAVFX. And let's try this out. Maybe it will just work. Fight, poison. Now at the beginning of every turn, the turtle displays a little poison effect, and that's working fine. So now conditions can display AVFX. Cool. So getting the UI to work with our AVFX also, you'll notice that when you hit something, the health goes down instantly, even before the move begins. And it's easy to fix this now. We can just use our tweens. So in Monster Renderer module, we've got update here, and we can see that we're updating the AUI bar to bound monster HP. We can improve that by just animating that with a tween. We'll make a new function for this here, animate HP bar. And instead of setting it, we can call animate HP bar with the new HP. We'll do the same tween code you should recognize by now. Var tween equals get tree, create tween. And then we just need to do tween property HP bar value new HP. We'll give it a quarter second to do it, but you can tweak that however you see fit. We'll test this, and you'll see that it runs at the beginning, which actually is how at least some Pokemon games work, so maybe you want this. Otherwise, you could put some sort of Boolean here to stop that from happening. I kind of like it, so let's just leave it. Let's add another fun animation. Let's have a look at the log. Everything just kind of pops in at once. What if everything typed out kind of slowly, like a typewriter effect? Let's have a look at a label node and see if there's a property we could animate for this. And the one I'm looking at is visible cars, visible chairs, visible characters. We can tween this property to show things come in one by one. Visible ratio is also an option, and we can use that if we want every single string to take the same amount of time, regardless of character count. So I think visible ratio might be a bit easier because we can ignore character count, and I will go with that. I'm going to make a new script called typeoutLabel that extends label, and we can give it a class name so we can instantiate it later. And we can delete our label from the main scene. Okay, I'm going to give it a simple function, populate display text with a string. And it just sets the text, which is already a property of label. And then we just need to make a tween. We want to tween property on self with the property display ratio. Actually, sorry, visible ratio, and it goes to 1 over some duration. I'm going to make a constant for typeout duration. 0.5 seconds is fine. You can, of course, change this yourself. And we want to make sure that the visible ratio starts at 0 and typeout duration float of 0.5 seconds. And now in log.gd, we don't want to create new labels. We want to create new typeout labels, and we use the new populate function. Let's give this a test out. We do a thing and it's broken because we can't create tree on a null value because we haven't added it to the tree yet. Let's make sure we add child before we populate. Run, fight, and now they all type in slowly. Cool. I don't know if we want them to come one after the other like that, but this is a good start for now, and I don't care that much about the log because that's sort of something just for our eyes. But we can use this for some other things, like displaying kind of blocking labels that you have to click through during a game. So what we want to do is create a new piece of UI that is going to put up our new typeout labels and then block both actions and also kind of pause our AVFX until the player interacts to dismiss things. So first I'm going to clean up our workspace. It's getting really messy, and let's make a new piece of UI in main. In battle renderer left here. We've got a controls menu, and let's make something underneath it. And I think this node is going to just be a panel. And we're going to add a child node to it. It's going to be a typeout label, and we've already made typeout labels a minute ago, so we can just add that here. Let's add some arbitrary text to it. And let's notice that it gets really long, so we would like to turn on auto wrap. Tweak the sizing to your liking, and let's move on. I'm going to name this message panel, and I'm going to give it a new script in res scripts UI message panel. It doesn't need a class name because we're not going to be using it anywhere else, but it does need an expert var label, which is going to be a typeout label. Let's see what happens when we ready it. We'll call populate with some test string, and then make sure that you connect the label to the exported field. And then we can test it, and it types right in. Cool. Now the hard part. Right now we're sending messages to this log panel, but we really want to do this individually and block interaction when it's happening. Simple, right? Not really. It took me quite a while to figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't disrupt the flow of the game and doesn't break everything else. So let's have a quick think about this. Most of our log calls are in monster controller and use monster move. So if we're emitting a ton of request log functions here, we can start here. We've got this they can't move string, we have miss, critical hit, and also some effects like do damage, have logs. We'll have to find a way to capture any and all of this and then block animations while they're showing. And we also want the AVFX to keep working. So I'm going to make a new AVFX to handle this sending message function and then capture that in our message panel, and then we can do some blocking logic from there. We'll have to collect messages in our move code, but I'm going to eventually have an array that we can send into each effect to kind of collect any additional messages, and then we can spit all of those out at the end. This will work because arrays are passed by reference, and adding to an array within a function will affect the array on the outside of the function too, because it's the same array. Let's make our new AVFX resource a script for AVFX messages. It's going to be an AVFX resource, of course, and we'll give it a name, AVFX messages. And it's going to have an expert var messages, which will be an array of strings for now. Unlike our other AVFX resources, I'm going to add a constructor, this init function, which is going to take in an array of strings. I'm doing this because we're going to be building this AVFX resource in code, and it will save us a line of code, which is good, I guess. As usual, we're going to emit an event here too. Events on avfx messages.emit with instance and messages. We've got to capture this somewhere, so let's do that. And we'll capture it in message panel, naturally. Back in message panel, let's connect up to that message. We'll create our event in events, and in message panel, we can connect it to, well, what do we do here? Let's make a function for show messages. We'll take in an instance and messages, and since that's what this is receiving from a resource, that should connect up. And we'll show the first message for now. We're going to need to figure out a way to go through these. And, well, let's see, we can just do label.populate messages 0. We're going to have to do a bunch of other stuff to make this function work, but let's just see if we can get it to show up with the first message we pass in. We need to make our message avfx and pass it to an array of messages, and we'll just send a little test. And now we want to make sure it's triggered in the same avfx group as other move avfx. This actually gave me a ton of trouble to figure it out. So if you do this and then you append to the group, the problem is that this is not a new array. It's a referenced array. So we have to actually duplicate this array. We'll test this and it didn't work. Why not? Let's just see if the messages panel is connecting. And it isn't. And the problem is that in Monster Controller, we need to send avfx group here, as that's the one we've actually modified. Now it sends test message. All right, what if we send multiple messages? We want a way to go through them sequentially and request user input to pass them. I'm going to change this from show messages to queue messages since we're actually going to be adding them to a queue. And we want to add some sort of message queue, an array, an empty array of strings. Then for message and messages, message queue.append message. And now what do we do about this? Let's do a new function for showing messages now, and it will just take in a message, I guess. And let's store a current message variable for now, string, and it can start as empty. And show message can do current message equals message, and then label.populate message. And we know that this is going to work. We will always show the first message here. Show message, message queue.prop front, which should pull the first message off and set it to show message. How do we deal with getting subsequent messages though? We need to capture some input. There are probably better ways in your game to do this, so use whatever works for you. But for this prototype, I'm just going to grab a click. You could grab a, confirm button on the joypad or whatever. You will have to choose something more specific for your large game. And then what do we want to do here? We want to, well, if current message isn't nothing and events is an input event mouse button, I think we want event.button index equals mouse button left and event pressed. And that's ugly and long, so I'm going to split it up so we can see it all. And if this condition is all true, we want to dismiss message, which we'll make as a new function. We'll clear the current message. We'll check if the message queue has a size of 0. Now we're going to want to come back here when we figure out how to do this, but the idea is if there's 0 messages left, we want to return control to the player. Otherwise, we want to show the next message in the queue, and you can see we get messages. When we do, we show the first one, and when the player clicks, we check if there's another message to send, and we show that one. Otherwise, we need to do something about this. Let's see if this is going to let us send multiple messages from Monster Controller. Okay. All right, looks like that's working. It freezes here at the end because we haven't finished the AVFX instance. If you recall from the other ones, if you don't finish it, it will freeze, and then we'll time out after 6 seconds, but that's fine. We can now add this. And we're also getting an issue with call method queueFree on a null value, and that's because we're not properly disposing our AVFX instances at all. So we can probably solve both of these together. So here's where it goes. If there's no messages in the queue, we dispose of the instance, but we aren't storing the instance, so let's store the instance. Now in dismiss message, let's finish the current instance. And then set it to null to clear it out. And let's see if that works. Okay, there's no errors anymore, so it looks like we're actually properly disposing of the instance now. All right, moving on. I think the next thing we want to deal with is how do we collect all the messages for a move to pass into our AVFX instance. So we're just tossing these test messages in for now, and let's figure out a way to not only grab these, but also collect all messages that effects also send. I think the move here is we want to create a new empty string array in useMonsterMove, and we'll call it logs. Now, whenever there's a request log, we also want to append to logs. And then we can just pass logs into here. For now, this is going to miss a bunch of stuff like the damage amounts, but it will work. So testing, and it works. Great. Now, how do we handle damage amounts? Those things actually get appended to the log from within effects, and we don't necessarily have access to our log array here, but what if we just did? So this is what I've come up with to do this. So I'm just going to pass logs into every single do effect. So this is going to be a pain, and we'll get it over with. Targeted effect needs to receive logs, which is an array of strings, and now we can copy and paste this into every do. I will do this quickly here because it is very repetitive, but take your time and get this right. Now, because we're passing this as a reference, adding an item to this array is actually adding an item to the array that we can access on the outside too. So in do damage, we'll append to our log array for each emit log, which should be easy. And I'll also do the same thing in heal. And I don't know where else it's being used. We might want to put one in condition saying a condition got added, but I haven't actually added that log yet and probably won't. You can figure that one out. It should be easy. The condition effects need it too, right? Because we just added those. I'm not going to do much here, but I'll pass in an empty log array for it to use. And now if we test, it's actually working, and it gives us damage values. Sweet. I think we could argue that the targeted effect args here are getting very messy. And if this were to grow a bit bigger, we would probably figure out a way to have an argument type that collects them all up for us, and we don't have to deal with the defaults. I'm not going to do that for now, but it's an option, and it might save you some pain later. Let's do a little more cleanup. You'll notice that we're duplicating our logs with our messages, and I think that we could just move request log into our message do loop and spit out the log right from the message, since we want to log every message anyways. And now we can remove all of the extra request logs. This might impact the order a bit, but I don't really care that much. Again, logs are just for us to see. We've got a few in Game Runner that aren't being captured by the AVFX message, so we'll leave them out for now, but we can look at them in a bit. And testing, everything is going into the logs, so that's great. Okay, next, how do we get this to block input and show up in the right place? Basically, I want our new message panel to appear in place of the controls menu when it's active, and then disappear when it's not. Let's visit our old friend Battle Renderer and give it some more expert vars. Controls is going to be a control to actually represent our menu, and a message panel, which is going to be a message panel, which needs a class name so we can use it as an export var. Back in Battle Renderer, that works, but what are we doing here? We should add some show and hide functionality for our panel. Let's just add some events. I'll add some signals for on message panel start and on message panel end. And these will be fired on the first message and the end of the last message to manage whether we should see and be able to interact with our controls. Let's connect them up. We need to do this to show and hide the message panel. And let's make functions to handle these that will show the panel and hide the controls, and vice versa. Finally, we want the message panel to be in a hidden state at the beginning, so we can just do hide message panel at the beginning. Okay, we'll connect our exports up and get these emitting, and I think we want to emit these from message panel. Whenever we queue messages, we want to emit on message panel start and dismiss on message panel end. And let's just see if this works, and it shows up in the right place, runs through the messages, and I think it's working just fine. Let's handle one little bug that I'm hitting. Well, remember we added a 6-second timeout for each AVFX, and our message box could easily stay up there for longer than 6 seconds, and that's causing an error. I think what we want to do is have the timeout timer for AVFX pause while we've got an active message. The easiest thing to do for this is in AVFX Manager Ready, want to connect to on message panel start and pause the timer there. And unpause it on message panel end. This should clear up that error, and we can test it, and everything is fine. Great. The last thing I want to do is handle some of those rogue log emits from quitting and such. In Game Runner, let's create a new AVFX messages resource here and set it to AVFX Manager with null since we don't have a monster. But hey, this is like 2 lines, and that's 1 more line than it was before. Ew. Let's make a convenience method for it in AVFX Manager, queue AVFX message that takes in a string. And we can take the code from Game Runner here and we'll make the messages just be the message. And we can just call QAVFX group directly. Feel free to make a version that takes in an array of strings if you'd rather have that. And now in Game Runner, we just want to call this with the string. And that should work fine. We can now use the same thing for no moves. And let's test, and that's cool. Now, because these are in effect groups, they will play at the same time as the other effects in the same group, but block the next group, which seems okay, I think. Anyway, okay, so that's all the audio and visual effects stuff that I wanted to implement. There is always a lot more that you could do, of course, but I think that this pattern should be clear enough that you can add your own without too much trouble. There is also a lot of polish left that one could do to improve how this system works and looks, and maybe we'll come back to that later, but probably not. The scope of this series sort of necessitates that there are some rough edges left over for you to work on, improve, make your own, whatever. I am recording this in mid-December 2025, and there's probably 3 or 4 more videos left in this series. We'll cover stuff like items, monster advancement, move management. After that, I'll be wrapping it up and moving on to the next thing that interests me. I've got plans in the works for a deep dive into fundamental GDScript, as well as some videos about roguelike design philosophy. If those things tickle your fancy, I recommend that you subscribe. And if not, I recommend that you don't subscribe, I guess, or subscribe anyways and leave me a comment on what you'd like to see. Maybe I will steal your idea. Anyways, Merry Christmas to the Christmas heads out there, and Merry anything else to everybody else. I will see you soon. Goodbye.